this did not come out of nowhere. There's a global context that I think is very important to understand 2019 in Lebanon, but also in the region. 2019 was a year of uprisings everywhere, from Latin America to the Arab region, with Sudan, Algeria, Iraq, Lebanon, and then later on Palestine, and it continued. So everywhere around the world, we're seeing discontent, we're seeing uprisings, we're seeing troubles with a global system, which is capitalism, that is creating everyday lives that are very difficult for people around the globe. So this is the more global context. But then we have the more regional context of what started in 2011 or end of 2010 with the first wave of Arab uprisings. And again, as I said, uprisings or revolutions are long-term processes. We always talk about the French Revolution. Well, what we miss is that it took almost 8 decades to form the First Republic. So revolutions usually will always take very long. It's huge social transformations that we're talking about. It's not just about changing a president or a king, or it's also about a huge social transformation that is unfolding, and that is that is a historical process that has started and that is very difficult to stop. Success failure is not the best way, I think, to think about these processes, but to think about how they're unfolding and what they're creating, and while they are unfolding. So regionally, there's, this is the region of the world that has very alarming indicators that also explain what is happening. The highest rates of youth unemployment, the highest rates of female unemployment, extremely high rates of labor migration, female participation in politics is very low, etc. So all of these are alarming indicators. And in the case of Lebanon, a financial crisis that started to unravel in summer of 2019. I think the early signs of this uprising started with the mobilization of the Palestinian camps in the summer of 2019. And it's usually the groups that are the least privileged in society that feel the financial crisis first. And it started there with a struggle for labor rights. And then there was the environmental crisis with the wildfires that ravaged many regions in the country, leading to October 17th and adding the taxes. So I think in the context of Lebanon, it's this sectarian neoliberal system that is very gendered and very racialized, that exploded socially in an uprising that was not organized. It's not a coup. So it's messy. It looks, it looks very difficult to understand, but it is a historical process that I think is still unfolding, and that will take many years, if not decades, to settle on a new political arrangement and social order as well.
Today, I know that this movement started in 2015 initially, even before that, 2009, 2011. With the Laik Pride, and later on the movement that happened following the Arab Spring. In 2015, you had the You Stink movement. It went dormant for 4 or 5 years, and suddenly the uprising happened. Before that, we had dire economic conditions, and even 1 month before the eruption of the uprising, fires ravaged South Lebanon, and you could see that the government did not do anything. We had the infrastructure, however, because of lack of maintenance throughout the years, we weren't capable of dealing with those wildfires that were happening, and we sought help from Cyprus and from Jordan. So we saw that those historical facts combined, and suddenly you could see that the system has collapsed. I mean, I know it didn't happen out of the blue, but back then in 2019, it was like out of the blue. Suddenly, our deposits were in the bank. We couldn't withdraw our own money. Like everything collapsed overnight.
Well, these protests in historical context, I tend to see them as part of the long crisis and breakdown of the sectarian and neoliberal hegemony that was established, sort of re-established in a way in the country during the 1990s, following the Civil War. The 2005 uprising played a major role in throwing off the Syrian occupation. A new generation came of age after 2005, many of whom have been searching for anti-sectarian alternatives that regenerate politics far beyond the imported global civil society, quote unquote, of the NGOs, and beyond the hierarchical politics of the factions. The anti-sectarian protest slogans of 2011, the You Stink protests of 2015, they're part of the background to this, and they show a jagged rhythm of development. And I suppose in this context, the socio-economic crisis in Lebanon is both a goad and an obstacle to the development of these new forms of politics. And I suppose we will also note that Hezbollah has now lost its hegemony in relation to the concept of resistance. As ever, as elsewhere, there will be a need for a process of unification, the consolidation of some more developed consensus around the meaning of the alternative. Obviously, a politics of pure opposition can only get you so far, whether in Lebanon or elsewhere.
I think that the establishing protest for this protest was the 2005 protest after the assassination of Prime Minister Hariri. But that one was more of a political camp against a political camp. But things developed in a way where people became more aware of their everyday life issues, of the economic, socioeconomic situation, of the cultural situation. So this is not a protest that is in vacuum. It definitely has a lot of things that happened back in the 90s, in the 2000s, but I think it's one of a kind in terms of addressing politics versus socioeconomic issues. I think this is one of the major historical events in modern Lebanon's history. And funny enough that it coincides almost 100 years, I mean, literally 2 years after, or literally 100 years after the official announcement or creation of the so-called Lebanon as it is today in 1920s. So I think this historical political significance, we still do not understand its dimensions, but I think it means something, and the coming years will show how it will unfold.
Throughout this workshop, I can think of the legacy of 2019 in a much bigger way, in a very important way. We used to think that it's over and maybe we didn't get what we wanted. But what I actually think is going to continue is, first of all, the freedom of expression. We had freedom of expression, but not in this way. And we actually need to also continue to reclaim what we believe is ours as citizens. It's not only about the state and the power, but it's actually about the people. And this is the time where we really need to rethink the spaces we live in, the conditions we live in, not only to claim our basic rights, but beyond our rights, and what really looks like us as Lebanese people and as a contemporary Lebanese society. Not the society we used to live, the golden age in Lebanon. This is over. We need to think of the real, the current, and the daily life we live in Lebanon.
The legacy of 2019 is that I think, geographically speaking, we managed to recollect pieces of Lebanon and put them together to have one entity and one item, one group of people sharing an understanding of life in general and expectation in life, and sharing a very specific political speech. While it may have not lasted long, it was very unique in the history of Lebanon. And since it's already happened and took place in such a monumental scale, I am hopeful that it could happen again in some certain context or in some way. And maybe the second time or third time, hopefully, it could lead to even more impact than it did in 2019. So maybe 2019, the legacy is that it's the start. It's proof that anything is possible in Lebanon, but we still need to put more effort into it.
The speech that comes after the protest is the real legacy, because even if like on a real real life level, maybe the protests didn't change a lot, but they did change the way we think, the way we see things, and the way we interact with each other, the way we see our roads and our highway. And the legacy is always gonna be in our minds and in our everyday encounters and in our collective memory. And finally, something that was highlighted in the workshop, like a sentence that stuck to me was, we have a lot to do. And yeah, we really do have a lot to do.